Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. In this video, I want to talk about the British. I want to talk about how divisive Britain has become, particularly if you happen to live in highly densely populated areas. Let's take, for example, London. And in particular, if you happen to be anywhere near a particular area in London known as Hyde Park. Now, many of you already know that I happen to be someone who visits Speaker's Corner. And Speaker's Corner is, to anyone who doesn't know, a place where you are free to go on a Sunday and talk about whatever you want. Whatever you want. Basically, there's no catch. You can just go there and talk about whatever. As long as you don't incite violence and as long as you aren't threatening physical assault on people, you are threatening to hurt people in any way, you are free to communicate what you want. And many people get on ladders, many people just talk to crowds, many people have just private conversations. It's a really nice idea and it has worked pretty well for hundreds of years. Speaker's Corner has been home to pretty much every group you can conceive of. If you want to go to Speaker's Corner to hear about the Ukraine-Russian war, you can do that. There will be people there speaking about it, and you can join in. If you want to hear about the latest American election results, you can do that. There will be people there who'll be willing to talk to you about that. If you want to talk about how you're a vegan and you don't like anyone and you want people to know you don't like anyone, you can do that. If you think that people should stop having children and voluntarily end their own bloodlines, you can do that. If you want to bring in your own cooked food from home and distribute it to everyone there, you can do that. Well, okay, I'm not actually sure if you can do that. I mean, that may have been a bit sketchy. I'm not sure if that guy could do that. But anyway, generally speaking, when you have an opinion and you want to express it at Speaker's Corner, you can do it. But over the last 2 decades, there has been a particular viewpoint, a particular religion that is antithetical to this whole idea. In order for Speaker's Corner to work, you need everyone to agree on one basic thing. People should be free to speak. And that idea of Speaker's Corner, freedom of speech, say what you want, works fine as long as everyone abides by that one rule. It falls apart when there is a dominant group that does not play by that rule and does not want that at all. I'm of course talking about Islam. Islam, with its somewhat quacky quirks, such as not allowing women to expose their hair in public for reasons, denying that God loves people but rather views them as slaves, having questionable views on the age of marriage, and fundamentally disagreeing with democracy. Islam has no provisions set aside for democracy. It isn't even an understood concept in Islam. There is no need for it. It is antithetical to something they already have, which is Sharia. In other words, their theological law. Muslims desire, as part of their religion, to have Sharia implemented. And of course, there'll be disagreements on exactly what that looks like. But one thing that definitely doesn't look like is democracy. First of all, they would need to have a framework for even viewing the female perspective as equal to a male in order to have an equal vote. Universal suffrage is a non-starter in Islam. Abandoning slavery is a non-starter in Islam. In fact, Islamic countries have only abandoned slavery largely because of efforts from the British. Check out when Saudi Arabia abolished slavery. I'll give you a clue. It was in the 60s. So as you can imagine, things work fine as long as there are no groups that assert themselves in ways which are authoritarian and take away rights from anyone else's ability to speak. But here's where it gets problematic. Islam has been growing, particularly at Speaker's Corner. The majority of people there now are Muslims of some variety. Atheism has largely been pushed aside. It has very little representation, I think is probably the best term to use. You still find atheists there, but they're not in numbers, they're not out in force. Likewise with Jews. There are occasionally Jews at Speaker's Corner, but not too many. And they tend to be incredibly brave, I have to be honest, given that they're not liked by a lot of Muslims at Speaker's Corner. But anyway, the only other group left that has some sort of identity, belonging, culture, and dare I say it, backbone is the Christian groups. There isn't anything else. In fact, you can even look at reviews online of Speaker's Corner, and even they'll tell you Speaker's Corner is now entirely religious. Most people just talk about religion because there is the dominant Muslim groups and there are the underdog Christian groups that are trying to oppose them. You see, what kind of makes this worse is the Muslim groups, they aren't just sticking to themselves. They don't just meet up, have a cup of coffee, talk with each other, and then go. Rather, their main goal there is to convince people to also become Muslim. And they have a pretty sketchy track record of how they do this, ranging from convincing people that they can give them wives and then failing to do that. Love bombing, constantly showering people with attention with the hopes that they'll join their group and become a Muslim by association. Getting them to say the Shahada without them knowing what the Shahada is. The Shahada being the Muslim statement of faith. In effect, how you officially become a Muslim. But there's good news. The good news is these Christian groups, and some others as well, constantly push back on these Islamic elements that harass people, that act in predatory ways. They tend to go for people who are quite young. They tend to go for people who are isolated, who have turned up to Speaker's Corner alone, who don't understand what Islam is, who have probably either never heard really a full understanding of Islam or even a partial one, but are placed on the back burner. They are surrounded by crowds of men who want to try and get cameras from every angle possible to record this interaction so they can then shame them on YouTube. And of course, if this person realizes they've been put on blast on YouTube and tries to complain, the Dawah guys will laugh in their faces and say, no, we don't have to. It was a public place and you consented by having the conversation. Lovely chaps. But we're starting to see pushback, and Christians in particular lead the charge in dealing with the Islamic problem at Speaker's Corner. Now, I just want to make it clear, there are many people, even in the Dawah teams, who I think are pretty cool guys. There are some people that are good people, but the ideology that has been sort of molded around them is a corrosive ideology that is incompatible with what me and the majority of people in the UK hold to on a basic level. It's not acceptable to intimidate people into becoming Muslim and then reminding them, as we have seen at Speaker's Corner, when they leave Islam, that they're now technically eligible for apostasy killing, which is when you leave Islam and they remind you that Muhammad, the Islamic prophet, said that whoever leaves his Islamic religion should be killed. And of course, they'll have a very clever, convenient backup here of, well, technically we don't actually have the Sharia in this place yet, and so we can't enforce this. But we just want to let you know that as soon as we do achieve this, it's intimidating and it's threatening, and that kind of behavior has no place in the West. It has no place in the UK. If I saw a Christian brother say something like this to another person who had left Christianity, I would be horrified and I would call him over and give him a good speaking to. But the Dawah guys don't do this because they all secretly understand that this is their theology and they're committed to it, so they just turn and look the other way. So going back to the Christian effort to disrupt the Islamic Dawah, to get people out of being cornered and pressured to appear on camera when they had no intention to, we have some amazing speakers, some amazing apologists, some amazing polemicists who spend their time going there and engaging with these Muslims, who engage in these crowds, often outnumbered 5, 6, 7 to 1, but that's not an issue for them because they're brave enough to do so and they have conviction. They are convinced that Christianity is true. They are convinced that people need to hear the message of the gospel. They are convinced that they are going to go into the lion's den and to take all of the Dawah guys on one by one, or sometimes many at a time, but you get what I mean. You have people like David, you have people like Bob, you have people like Bob Jr. Yes, there's now a Bob Jr. and he looks just like Bob. You have Thomas Apologia, you have Sig, and countless others, and I'm sure I've missed people, who go there on a weekly basis and do everything they can to get people out of being coerced into something they don't fully understand. And this in effect is the whole point of Speaker's Corner. It's meant to be about dialogue and debate and discussion. It's meant to not be intimidating. It's meant not to harass people who never wanted to have a discussion in the first place with anybody. They were just passing through, or they just wanted to have a look at what was going on. Perhaps they didn't even know it was Speaker's Corner. And that's why what these guys are doing is such a great effort and something I completely support. And of course the Dawah guys decided that they would engage with the Christian side in dialogue and they would address their concerns. Oh wait, no. No, they didn't do that at all. In fact, we have a clip here to show exactly what they did think they should do. Let's watch this clip.
Say that again. Okay, man. Thank you. On mic, Mansur.
Some group of heckler will be sent to your discussions. Don't worry.
It's okay. A message to the Christian community.
Yes.
stop sending young underage kids to discuss with Muslims. Have your own discussion. If you keep on harassing Muslim discussion,
it's not
Christian discussion can take place in Speaker's Corner, because we can do the same. We can make you taste your own medicine.
Okay, so Mansur, you're going to come to me for free.
No, not to you.
Ladies and gentlemen.
To Bob, for example.
Okay.
And we will heckle Bob, so that Bob doesn't have any discussion. And we'll heckle every other single Christians if you want to do that. So if you really want to have some kind of free discussion, Speaker's Corner, let Christians have their own discussions.
Yeah.
Let Muslims have their own discussion. Do not come and heckle them.
Okay, beautiful.
Does that make sense?
So, Mansur, your practice is distinct from the Christians, to which you will go up to Christians which are not learned in their faith, to which I will support those Christians, not engaging with him, rather helping the Christians with answering their question. When I offer to engage in a polemic or a formal debate, he runs away like a coward.
That was one of the Dawah guys at Speaker's Corner, who's been there for probably around 30 years at this point, if not longer. Mansur is arguing that the Christians and Muslims should segregate. Basically segregate on religion and have one area of the park for the Muslims and one area of the park for the Christians, because they are not happy that the Christians keep wanting to intercede when they find vulnerable Christians or atheists or Jews or agnostics who are alone with big crowds of 10 to 20 men all gathered around with 3 to 4 to 5 cameras on them. They're not happy that Christians are trying to get involved in that and trying to disrupt it, because heaven forbid they can't lambast some poor kid on YouTube for the ad revenue that it generates. And this to me is wonderful. I like where Mansur's going with this, because it demonstrates just how weak Dawah is and how weak the Islamic perspective is. Islam thrives at Speaker's Corner in a sense, in one sense, because no one really understands what it is. There are very few people that understand Islam well enough to be able to have dialogues with Muslims that are not just one-sided, or feeling that you ought to concede more than you would simply because you happen not to be as well informed as you hope you would be. But tides are changing and people are becoming more familiar with what Islam actually teaches and what you're really signing up for when you finish saying the Shahada. I'll give you a clue, it's not all rainbows and pixie dust. Islam actually has a collection of pretty foul doctrines that the average person is probably going to heave at when they hear it. Notice Mansur, first of all, admitted that he can't really engage with this. He simply could have said, look, we'll do what we used to do. We will have debates with people openly, and that will be enlightening to both the Muslim viewers, the Christian viewers, and anyone else who watches. And it's also fair and it's balanced. Yeah, they stopped doing that probably 3 or 4 years ago, or at least they started to go more in that direction about 3 or 4 years ago, because it reached a critical mass of too many people who know too much about Islam. And when you get that critical mass, Islam can't really do anything other than hide. It has nowhere left to go. It can't exploit any ignorance. So when it tells you things like Islam is a feminist religion, you can be like, no it isn't, here's why. Islam teaches equality, no it doesn't, here's why. Islam doesn't really threaten to kill you if you leave it after joining Islam, absolutely it does, here's why. So on and so forth. I for one am not a big fan of segregation. I don't want the different religions to be segregated. Okay, for 2 reasons. One, I don't like segregation generally, but number 2, I just really enjoy going into these Muslim groups and talking to them about things, and when someone tries to take advantage of someone's ignorance, you can jump in and say, hey, that's actually not true. What that person has just said to you is a lie. They're hoping that you're ignorant of it so you won't call them out. Keep in mind, this is being filmed by 3 or 4 different YouTube Dawah channels that are going to lambast you and mock you and ridicule you in the thumbnail, in the title, in the description, and in the content itself, which will be selectively edited to push a narrative. This is how Dawah works. It's like a wet roll of toilet tissue that's just unraveling and ripping into 1,000 pieces. All that is required is to educate yourself on what Islam teaches and to be bold enough to go out and talk to people. Not alone, but with people who are already there. There are already people at Speaker's Corner, the Christian teams in particular, who you can talk to, who can help fill in gaps in knowledge, and who can get you into a perfect position to be able to critique Islam in a way that they won't have responses for, and allows you to inform people and stop people from being taken advantage of. The Christian perspective is the only one that I see that has enough strength in its conviction to make a difference. I haven't seen this from any atheist side, any agnostic side. I haven't seen this from, and keep in mind, there are people that I have a high opinion of that I would still say there just isn't enough conviction there. They aren't ready to put their money where their mouth is and to go out and to actually proclaim and learn and study and put it to use. It's the Christians who have that. There's something with the Christians. From a Christian perspective, we'd say this isn't a mere accident. There is something that is not just materialistic happening here. Through the conviction of the Holy Spirit, we're convicted to do this, and we're convicted to win. Not to back down under intimidation, threats, whether we want to look at some horrifying things that have happened to Christians in the past. Somehow it just keeps motivating Christians to increase. We don't decrease, we just get bigger, we just get more passionate, we just go relentless. Because that's what you need to make a dent, and that's what you need to protect your culture and to protect your worldview, to protect your religion, to protect everything that you hold dear to yourselves. You need to be able to stand up and do that. So I would say this, ladies and gentlemen, if you are a Christian, if you are someone of whom is capable of learning, if you're someone whom is capable of speaking to a crowd, then perhaps it's time to think about coming to Speaker's Corner. And perhaps it's time to contribute something that is for something bigger than yourself, and for something that will help other people in the future to remember what it is that they have in the Christian faith, what they have in the British values that we hold dear to us, and why they're worth protecting. And not only just protecting, but asserting as being better than alternatives. Because when you do that, Mansur isn't very happy about it. Neither are any of the Dawah guys, because they're hoping you don't. They're hoping that Christians do not become familiar with Islam and stay ignorant, so they're easy pickings for people who have spent 30 years memorizing scripts, learning how to perform theatrics, and underhanded rogue-like behavior to intimidate others. It's something to think about. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not a Christian, then today's the day. You can email me at chris@speakerscorner@gmail.com. My email is in the box down below. If you have any questions about the faith, I'll do my best to email you back. And for everyone who's watching, God bless you all. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one. God bless.